good morning or good afternoon, wherever we are. I'm Lorna Trigg, and I have Skydancer Apothecary, and you're visiting with me today at Fire Earth Retreat Center, which is actually a botanical sanctuary. We're listed on the National Register, so that means that we grow medicinals and we protect the land. There's no hunting, fishing, or over-harvesting. And that was just a wonderful thing to become part of that. It really allows me to let people come and walk the property. I try and mark the plants that I'm growing. We grow in small batches. We're on a very sort of interesting terrain here, from riparian to very dry, scrubby type of land with 12 springs. So what I do here, I'm in my studio, and the studio is a multimedia studio. I've always worked multimedia. Two of my main projects are always working in clay and growing medicinals. So both have to do with dirt or mud or digging in the dirt. I think I might have been a mole in a past life. But I like to work multimedia, so I have a clay studio set up, and I do have students, and when I bring people in to work in clay, I like to teach them to use their hands and do hand building. When I say use your hands, you always use your hands, but instead of, I'm sitting in front of a potter's wheel, which I use, but I don't have students using that. I think the basis of mostly everything I do has to do with getting back to your roots or to our ancestral roots. So whether that is making a pot or a bowl that you're going to eat out of and hand building it, or a utilitarian piece that you're hand building. So I like to work with clay in that fashion, is letting people be in the process of building with clay. I also do some botanical illustration. One of my absolute favorite things to do is work in watercolor, and doing that, what I can do is really start studying the plants that I'm working with. In an herbal fashion, I feel that there's a missing link. I think you go into an apothecary and there's all this beautiful dried herb in bottles, but do you really know that plant? So for what I grow on the property and what I work with, I illustrate as I'm working with those plants, or as they're starting to grow in the different seasons and the different stages of their life. So illustration is one of my favorite things. I don't do lots of large paintings, but I take those illustrations and use them on my tincture bottles or on my salves. The studio's, again, as I said, multimedia. So if I am in the mood for working with fabrics, I have fabrics. I used to do some theater work, and so costume designing is one of my loves as well, and sort of fantasy, creating fantasy outfits. Boot making happens in the winter. Only in the winter, because in the spring and the summer I'm busy. In the spring I'm busy in gardens. And years ago in Africa, in another life, I learned to make shoes and boots. And now what I do is offer classes in the winter. So you can come in and you can design up your own shoes or your own boots. And again, the idea behind that is that we're using our feet, we're using our metatarsals. We don't want to restrict our feet in any way. And so you can build something that actually fits your foot, whether it be narrow, whether it be broad, whether it be high arched. We're not trying to cookie cutter your feet into one shape or size. And so I use that talent that I learned years ago in Africa, working with an orthopedic and creating shoes and boots for people with difficult feet. I now show people how to do that for themselves. So I think the basis of what I do has to, as I said, do with life skills, how to connect with these plants, which are our natural medicine, and how to work with some of the materials that are available to us. How do we do this? How do we create the life that we want and the things that we want instead of running out to a store? So I grew up in South Africa, and that brings me to the thought of talking about a pot or something that you might need in your home. If we're with the indigenous people, when they needed a pot for cooking in or for storing something, they would go out and collect the clay, they would process it, they would build what they needed. If they needed a pair of shoes, they would process the leather, and all indigenous cultures did this. They would process the leather from an animal that they had harvested for food and use that. It didn't just become a byproduct, it actually became part of what they did. So I think growing up with that type of influence in South Africa around the indigenous people has brought me kind of full circle to where I am now, and that's trying to share that information and empower people into taking charge of your lives and what you can do for yourselves and not looking outside of yourself. I think we've done that way too much. So if you wanted to come to Fire Om Earth or Skydancer Apothecary, we're open to visits. If you can look on the website, we have two websites, Fire Om Earth, it's an Om, O-M, not on Earth, so we're not on fire, we're a universal vibration. And Skydancer Apothecary, too much of a long story about why Skydancer is Skydancer, but when you come and visit me, I'll fill you in. But if you look on the website, you'll find our contact information. You can visit by appointment. The studio and apothecary is open by appointment. You can walk the grounds. The grounds are open at any time. When you arrive at the entrance, there's a labyrinth. You can walk the labyrinth. There's a brochure that shows you where the trails are. And I always remind people, when you see a trail, it could have been a deer trail, but it's a trail, or it's now a established trail. Most of the gardens are marked. The plants are marked with markers, so you can see who's growing here. We have a artist's cottage. We call it the artist's cottage, and that's sleeps 2 to 3 people. It's mainly set up for retreats, and you can find that on the websites as well, or you can find it through Airbnb. We do have a minimum of 7-day stays, so it's really set up as you can come and retreat here. You can find classes to take with me. If you're looking for a massage therapist, I can put you in touch with one. I can also outsource from here with things that you might have an interest in. Ayurvedic practitioners, healthy foods. You can do a number of different things with me, or you can just have quiet time on your own. So mostly through the website, Fire Om Earth, Skydancer Apothecary, either of those, you'll be able to get hold of me. You can also do a class with Craig, who builds ocarinas or whistle flutes, and that you would have to set up. You'll see information on our classes on our websites. Herbal walks, there's sign up for the newsletter if you're close in the area. And you can take a pop-up herbal class or schedule a class if you're visiting. And I have eventually started using my blog. I just did a recent blog post, and it really has to do about a mulled wine, and comes from an inspiration from Hildegard von Bingen. This mulled wine, when it has the spices in there on the blog, it tells you why you're using those spices. So again, it's learning. I think, yeah, come and pay us a visit. Eureka Springs is a historical Victorian town full of eccentric people and beautiful spas, and it's quite beautiful. It's one of the most beautiful little towns to visit, so come and pay us a visit.